Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Nancy Bowen, and I'm leading this webinar on using the TOUCHSTONES journal, which is a theme-based ministry journal available to you by subscription, which we will talk about at the end of the webinar. So I am pleased to have everybody here. I feel fairly confident that everyone who's joining us tonight does subscribe to the TOUCHSTONES journal. But if we have a few that haven't seen it yet, everyone did receive a complimentary copy of the December issue, which is an 8-page theme-based focused journal with worship resources, articles, family time, and we're going to go through each of those sections for the imaginative ways that subscribers have been using the journal in the hopes that it will give you some new ideas and make this resource an even more helpful part of your pastoral ministry, your worship ministry, your small groups, and especially your ministry to families. So we'll be exploring the issue that you received, and if you have a copy with you, that might just allow you to flip back and forth between pages and to recognize some of the quotes that I might use as we talk about different options you have. Our topic for December is peace. The First Universalist Church of Denver, the publisher, in quotes, of the TOUCHSTONES journal, has a 5-year cycle of theme-based ministry. So there will be ultimately 60 issues of TOUCHSTONES, and before we cycle back to the first year's themes and find new resources for those themes. But for our purposes tonight, we're going to be exploring the theme of peace. So I'm very interested to know how many of you are using the journal as a theme-based ministry resource, and how many of you might be using it more simply as a worship resource, or as a small group ministry resource, or family ministry, which I'm hopeful of. So let me give those options to you one at a time, and let's see a little bit of voting with your mood button and raising your hand. So my question is, are you using theme-based ministry in your congregation? If you would raise your hand, that would indicate yes. Okay, I'm getting thumbs up and hands up both, okay? So it looks like we have a couple of theme-based ministry congregations, and then some that are using the resource but not using it for theme-based. So you might want to go back to I'm fine, and we'll ask another question. How many of the congregations are using the small group ministry section of the TOUCHSTONES? Oh, there's so many more resources for you all to explore, okay? Some are using it and some are not. You can all find this over on the left on your attendees. So how many of you are using the Family Matters section of the journal to be more supportive of families in your congregation? Okay. Okay, it looks like Harold is. Grants Pass is not. Auburn's not. I need to make a little wider. Okay. Well, thank you. I am going to be intent then on helping you explore more of the ways that this journal can enrich your congregational ministry. And I mean that whether you're a lay-led congregation, which I know Harold's congregation is a long-standing lay-led congregation, and others of you have ministers who are enjoying this resource also. So I know that you use the journal when it comes in different ways. We have a couple of congregations who pretty quickly send the journal to everyone in the congregation. This is completely at your option and totally fine thing to do. I think it would be interesting at some point for you to query your own congregation and see whether this is a resource that they are using and enjoying, or whether you're sending it into the into an uninformed population that isn't quite sure what you expect them to do with it, which I have found has happened before. So minimally using articles from the journal in your newsletter. Perhaps some of you do a midweek e-blast where information on this theme could be part of your e-blast. Website articles, of course, are fine. Just an opportunity to get everyone thinking. We have a couple of congregations that are using information from the journal to stimulate conversation. So let's look at the different aspects that appear in almost every monthly journal. There's always a wisdom story, and I would urge you to seriously consider using this if you have not prior. One of the things that has been problematic in the development of Unitarian Universalist culture is that we haven't developed a library of teaching tales like most other religions have. Now, I certainly don't want to indicate that ours needs to become a holy book. We can learn from a lot of different teaching tales. And so there are usually 2 or 3 good stories in each journal. But this story, though, can become kind of a shorthand for conversations in the congregation. It can be a funny and somewhat light-hearted way to refer to difficult subjects when they come up, and can help people kind of let go a little and recognize which role they might be playing in the story. Stories are, of course, a great way for a family to have conversations about important topics around values, around interpersonal relationships, things like that. So our story this month is called A Touch of Honey, and it's about a careless queen who doesn't pay attention to the ripple effect of the consequences of dropping a bit of honey off of the balcony of her castle. And a number of, a whole cascade of bad things happen. And so there are many lessons that could be drawn from this. There are many roles played in the story that you could take a look at what happened in the story from different perspectives and ask questions about who could have done something differently towards a different outcome. What is our responsibility and accountability to the common good would be a question we would ask everybody, including the Queen. So that the story is a good one. And if you have a gifted storyteller in your congregation, this would be an especially great way for that person to shine and to offer your story in an especially memorable way, being told rather than read. The Compassion in Action section is frequently dedicated to how we might change in order to change the world. It often has individual practices that we might commit ourselves to, if only for the month that we're working on this. And those that are resonant with us, we will no doubt continue to practice. In this month, the Compassion in Action has a number of suggestions for minimizing conflict and for how we might maintain a more peaceful, inner, tranquil disposition. This particular one provides some very good opportunities for group conversations around common norms, or how we want to be together in congregational life or in ministry teams or in small groups. And again, I would never underestimate the value of this journal in terms of supporting the Unitarian Universalist family practices, to have an intentionally Unitarian Universalist home. And so some congregations, larger than some of yours actually, do the family page and the story and print it up in a 1-page, 2-sided handout for their families at the beginning of every month. And I understand people keep it in the car for those times when they're um, dropping people off between school and sports, or stuck waiting for somebody to finish, they have a little resource for conversation. The Compassion in Action is also an opportunity for our social change groups to consider what part of the change you want to make in the world needs to happen within you also, so that we are entering our social change from a position of humility rather than anger or arrogance. The contemplation section is linked with the readings from the Common Bowl and is primarily a practice. It's basically the same every month, giving people a kind of guidelines for how to establish a practice of contemplation, reflection, or meditation using the readings from the Common Bowl. I did get a couple of emails from people who were unable to join us tonight, indicating that Dawn Cooley, I think Dawn is in one of the Tennessee or Kentucky congregations. I'll check and see where her note is. And she uses the Dawn's in Louisville, where we were for General Assembly. And she uses the readings from the Common Bowl. There's one for each day of the month, and sends a little email message to everyone who has subscribed, doing a very brief reflection on one of those quotes each day, just a thought for the day that different members of her congregation subscribe to. I think that's an excellent use of it, and speaking as a minister, to have one quote for each day is about 80% of the challenge. When you try to write a thought for the day, having a place to begin is often the most difficult part of the whole discipline. So the readings from the Common Bowl appear every month, and different congregations are using these quite differently, some for personal contemplation, as we just mentioned. They've been used as blog topics in congregations that have a blog on their website or have prompted website articles. T-shirts. If your congregation finds a particularly compelling quote that fits on a T-shirt, they've used it for a quote on the back of their congregational T-shirt, a quote that is somewhat summary of their understanding of Unitarian Universalist theology or ministry. Obviously, they're used in our small group ministry readings. It's interesting to find the polarities between these different readings. It's not important to do all of them. 31 small readings in the course of a worship service is, I think, way too many. But in the course of a month, you might read all of them in combinations that support your worship service. If you take a look at the page that has the readings from the Common Bowl, almost every month I've been able to find some polarities. Now, polarity is interdependent opposites. Most often we characterize a polarity by reminding you of inhaling and exhaling. We could not choose between them. And each is excellent, wonderful, healthy, feels good, if that's in fact what you need to do. So when we can find polarities in a worship topic, we have a rich conversation going inside the materials that you might present. And there are often polarities. There are sometimes very contrasting perspectives in the readings from the Common Bowl. I think that day 10 and day 17 in the Peace article, day 10 is from Noam Chomsky. Peace is preferable to war, but it's not an absolute value. And so we always ask, what kind of peace? And I would contrast that with day 17, quote from Thomas Mann, war is only a cowardly escape from the problems of peace. Very strong statement. Very strong statement. And how would we put that in relationship to the military service that many of our members are involved in? We have many military chaplains. We have been a country experiencing foreign wars for the last 13 years. So these are rich and complex issues, and the more complexity you're willing to allow into your worship presentations, the more likely you are to touch the hearts and minds of those who have gathered. So there are many diverse ways to use the readings from the Common Bowl. And I would also urge you to remember that human beings need to hear things more than once. I think as Unitarian Universalists, we have become somewhat enamored of novelty, and it frequently will rob us of the capacity to go deeper and deeper into a topic or into the nuances of what a reading might mean. And the readings from the Common Bowl, many of these quotes are quite complex and merit thinking through the motivation for the quote, the consequences if you were to accept that as truth, as a worthy behavior in your own life. What would that mean to you? So I urge you to allow people the luxury of repeating things in the course of the month so that they can think about it more deeply, can revisit it, can even remember it, because sometimes when things shock us or are so far outside our current realm of reference, we can't even remember them. And yet to hear them again, we're better able to take it in the second time. So this is a really rich page with a lot of possibility for congregations. Faith and Theology is also in every month's issue. And this is where you'll have sermon snippets, which have all been printed with permission. And you should always credit them, but you may also quote them and use them in your worship development. There are a lot of thoughtful passages that will also work in small group ministries, that will be appropriate reflection topics for a ministry team or committee that is meeting and looking for an opening reading, that they would devote 10 minutes of conversation to deeper understanding of one another and a deeper exploration of Unitarian Universalism before they move into the work agenda. And I think reading these also stimulates us to consider how would we more thoughtfully explain Unitarian Universalism. Are there things, parts of this theology, that statement, and like I say, they're different every month, but this particular one comes from our 2010 GA Statement of Conscience, and it has 8 different theological statements. Are these all true to you? Are all of them key to your understanding of Unitarian Universalism? Are there any that are missing, any key components of Unitarian Universalism that are missing in this list for you? So this is also a very rich resource page that could be used in a myriad of different ways. The page is frequently filled out with sermon topics or excerpts. So you can tell from my earlier comments that the Family Matters page is one of my favorites. It's true that I'm no longer raising children at home. We have 4 daughters, and they're all grown and starting their own families. But one of the things I do frequently hear as I move through the smaller congregations in the Mountain Desert District is that when young families with young children, come into our congregations, they are not coming from another religious tradition anymore. They're primarily coming from an unchurched background. And so they don't understand this tradition well enough to bring it to their homes if we don't help them. So it's a primary resource to help new families new to the congregation, or families who have been there a long time and whose children are growing up and they need new conversations, new ways to continue to keep the family focused on the same set of core values. So I mentioned earlier that we have a congregation, a subscribing congregation, that does a one-page front and back reproduction of the Family Matters page and then other activities, frequently compassion in action, and gives that as a handout once a month to every family. You might print some of these ideas in the order of service to help families, especially if the order of service is one that people can carry home from your congregation. A midweek email. You might put it on your website under a Families Matter section of the website. That would give people an opportunity to, have some lively conversations when they have to go on a road trip, or be able to start a conversation with a story that takes kind of the pressure off of any kind of shaming and blaming that could be perceived by introducing an important third thing into a conversation, which is what our stories allow us to do, to introduce that important third thing that all of us can talk about because it isn't about any particular one of us. The wisdom for life is one that I find the most quite varied from month to month, and it's always interesting. This month it's about Henry David Thoreau and prophetic imagination, but different ones have been around space and our human exploration of space and the beauty of the universe and things like that. So kind of a page of integration is how I see this, and an opportunity to consider an integrating function for the theme of the whole month. And obviously none of these themes are unrelated to all of the other themes that Touchstones has dealt with and will deal with in the future. So this is also an opportunity for integrating the previous month's theme with this month's theme, or beauty, the relationship between beauty and peace, or between transcendence and peace. Any of those might be explored in the wisdom for life. I also think it's an important resource for our social change work, so that we are able to come into our desire to create a more just and equitable world with a bit of humility, and wisdom is generally considerably more humble than politics and knowledge. And we frequently get a lot of good history here. So this particular article, entitled The Rest of the Story, allows us to root the topic of peace in our own historic development as a religion. And then the small group ministry. Now, I know it takes a lot to organize a small group ministry and to kind of keep the rotations going, but I would urge all of you to experiment this year with a 3 or 4 session small group ministry model. It's outlined in the journal each month, and all of the resources you need are contained in each journal. It's one of the most effective ways that we can integrate new members, that we can explore important topics in a respectful way that is more than a discussion and allows respect for each of us having our unique life experiences and bringing those into the full awareness of the congregate or of the other people who are in the small group ministry. I have found that small group ministry is one of the most effective methods we have of developing pluralism from the diversity that we have invited. We've invited diversity, differences. We don't expect everyone to believe the same thing or do the same kind of work or be in the same socioeconomic class. And yet inviting that difference by itself is not sufficient to create community from it. We need to hear one another's stories. We need to understand the impact that my life has on your life. And a respectful, structured conversation about important topics is one of the most effective ways to do this. There are a lot of resources about small group ministry, and certainly I would be happy to send those to you specifically if that were something that you thought your congregation might be willing to experiment with sometime in the spring. I would suggest for starters you take 4 sessions. You might even do 4 sessions in a month, or you might do 4 months with 1 session each month. The key thing about small group ministry is that it is a time-limited commitment. We say yes to 4 sessions on peace. And when that 4th session is over, the group has a closing ritual, and we are no longer part of that small group ministry. We might do another one at another time with a different topic, and it would have a beginning and an ending also. So it's an excellent resource for deepening community. It's effective. Deepening community is a helpful thing in terms of encouraging volunteer leadership, volunteers on your ministry team, generosity in your annual stewardship campaign. So the deeper the community, the more authentic the community in terms of people really knowing one another, the healthier the congregation is. So as we begin to wrap this up, I wanted to be sure that you know that the Wordle that is created by First Universalists, and it's yours to use, that's the piece, it appears on the front page of every journal, and it kind of has synonyms, and I showed it at the beginning of the slide. That's yours as a subscriber. You can cut and paste it out of the journal, or you may send an email to First Universalist and they can send you images. Sometimes in a PDF, the images are protected enough that you can't cut and paste them. But all of the images in the journal are from Creative Commons, and they are free for your use with attribution. So the attributions all appear in the journal. So tracking them down is not difficult if you wanted to reproduce them on your order of service or in your own newsletter if you were cutting and pasting. The historic figures and the pictures of the Unitarian Universalists are not in the Creative Commons, but permission will follow with your subscription. Like in the piece one, we have a picture of Aidan Ballou in the middle of the page, and that you can find by typing his name in. There are many pictures of Aidan Ballou, so you just pick how old you want him to be in your picture. And then, as I have said, some people distribute to their entire congregation, some do not, but your subscription allows you to distribute to your entire congregation. It would be, given that this is a subscription journal, it would be better if you post it on your website if it's a protected post. The way we will be able to continue to produce Touchstones is if we can continue to have an increasing number of these very affordable subscriptions. And then I don't think we have very many people on who aren't already subscribers, but should you be speaking about this with someone, subscriptions are still open, and we always send everybody the back issues to make their subscription actually the full 12 months, even if they, like we had a new subscription in November and we sent them all of the back issues. So I think that's our presentation, and I haven't seen too many questions roll up with regard to the presentation, but I'm going to take us back to our Wordle since I think I used a word that everybody might not be, there we go, familiar with, and open our conversation for questions or good ideas that you have used. I know that Harold is with us, and I don't think Joyce made it, but Mavis is here. They both sent me emails. Okay, Mark is saying they have approved the purchase, but not sure if they've received it yet. I have not received your subscription yet, Mark. I would recognize a Two Rivers UU subscription, but I'll get you all the back issues as soon as I receive it. Great. Do follow up. Harold is writing us a note that they're using it monthly, both on Sunday and a monthly small group outreach program. Great. Great. We can't let Harold talk, can we, because of the way he's hooked up, but it would be interesting for us to hear a little bit about the small group outreach program that they're offering. Is anybody using the Family Matters group? Oh, Harold's got a mic on now? Okay. Great. Tell us a little bit about your outreach program, Harold.
Oh, okay. You must be able to hear me now.
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. We use it on Sundays. Our small group, what we did was we wanted it to be an outreach to the community and not just for our regular members. And so we set it up on a meetup.com site to attract some people, and about half of the people on it now, on the group for it, now are non-UUs that we're trying to attract and interest in our congregation, and the other half are our congregational members. And this is quite different than the other small groups we've done. We've usually done discussion groups that are very much discussions and trying to resolve problems, coming up with, like, we did one on immigration, a lot of problems and possible solutions in that. But for this program, it's much more a listening to others and deepening and enriching ourselves by hearing different voices. And we've found that very different. I think some of our congregants may or may not be as interested in that, but I know that our newcomers welcome it. They say they love having the opportunity to speak and be listened to, and also the opportunity just to hear others.
That's excellent, Harold. That's actually pretty much the small group ministry model. You've simply been able to use it in a public forum. And I think that you will continue to find that newcomers appreciate the structure. It's safer than what can become a heated discussion. Great idea. Thank you. Others who would share with us some of the ways you're using this resource. Do most of the current subscribers use the worship resource packet to plan services? That is what I have heard. So we can hear what people say on the chat here. The small congregations have been most thrilled with the worship planning resource. And as some of your voting indicated earlier, may not be using the resource as thoroughly as they could and might in the future. Yes, I think I agree with Harold. There is enough material here to do a couple of services. I wonder, we might vote just again. Those of you who are familiar with it know that the journal comes with a separate Word document with the small group ministry resources, which are also printed in the journal. And then it comes with a worship resource packet. And this is a pretty incredible packet to help you design services, to kind of pre-screen resources for readings, for prayers, for music. Okay, well, friends, there's no reason for me to keep you on the phone, and the computer longer than our conversation merits, but I hope that you have heard a few new ways that you can use this resource that are pretty easy to do because the resource comes to you beautifully formatted and can be used in any fashion for you. If you choose to use it in other ways and you need to receive it not as a PDF, if that's too locked down for the way you want to use it, I will send it to you in another format that allows an easier cutting and pasting. It's sometimes a little bit less stable, so you would still receive the PDF so that you know that you have your journal, but we can also send you a Word document. The congregation in Reno gets a Word document as well as the PDF each month because of the way they're using it in their online newsletter. So, Lori, do you think we're ready for goodbyes? I don't see any hands up, and I don't see any other questions in our...
I don't see any questions either. I just put one more prompt in there, but if there are no questions, we'll do a closing here. Here we go. Grants Pass says something. So Grants Pass would like to receive both formats if possible.
Yes. I'm going to make a note of that, but if you would send a note to the email that always sends you the journal, that's me. I'm the distribution arm of the journal, and so my email is nbowen, NBOWEN. I'll type it into the box. Sorry, of course, that would be much better.
And it looks like you'll also have Mavis from Whidbey would like it, and Nancy as well. So they're really liking that option you're putting out about the doc.
Okay. So we've got Grants Path, Nancy's in. Oh yes, I recognize where she is. Okay. Let me get that to you in the next day or two. And I was going to take our closing reading from the journal, just a moment. I think that there are many opportunities when a reading from the journal could be especially helpful in terms of starting a meeting with an intention to focus on Unitarian Universalism. And in the same way that I think our UU World magazine is also often providing us with articles that can be especially helpful in developing the group of leaders, because they would have an opportunity to have this same kind of important conversations about Unitarian Universalist values before they commit their time to doing the very real work of leading our congregation. So I'm going to close us with day 27 from Readings from the Common Bowl. Compassion is sometimes the fatal capacity for feeling what it is like to live inside somebody else's skin. It is the knowledge that there can never really be any peace and joy for me until there is peace and joy finally for you too. Frederick Buechner. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's all stay in touch as the Touchstones Journal community.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you everybody else for joining us tonight. Good night to all.